Bigfoot call or fat girl fart? You make the call. Welcome, everybody, to the Squatchers Lounge podcast. Once again, we are live here, coming to you from Northern California. Tonight, we're talking about Bigfoot shelters, do's and don'ts, yes or no's. We got a whole lot of weird stuff to talk about tonight, for sure. As you guys may remember, last week, we were talking about... last week during Bigfoot Entertainment Monthly, we talked about, why is this being so weird now? I don't know. Who cares? There, whatever. We were talking about the whole rigmarole about Bob Gimlin supposedly giving Russell Accord some kind of a confession about the Patterson-Gimlin film, and of course we reached out to Steve Coles, who was wrapped up in the middle of it, who gave us a statement that he stood behind everything that he was saying. Russell Accord told him some 15 months earlier that the same thing, that this rumor that was going around. And it really kind of shed some shadow on the on whether the Patterson-Gimlin film was real or not, and all this rigmarole. Well, now here again, within a week's time, it has flip-flopped once again, and Steve Coles went on the record, at least in print, and said that he was indeed mistaken, that apparently Russell Accord did not tell him such a thing 15 months ago, that it was a completely misdrown thing, even though I have the audio that says that it couldn't possibly be any of that. It apparently still turned out to be that way. I don't know. Supposedly there's, after all the digging is done and everything is said and through, Bob Gimlin never gave anybody a confession about the Patterson-Gimlin film. As a matter of fact, as a parody, I dug very, very deep into this situation, and lo and behold, I did find something by Bob Gimlin that was very striking, and it's going to strike right to the very core of the Bigfoot community. So I figured I'll go ahead and play that for you, and you make the decision as to what you think of it. So here we go.
On October 20th, 1967, me and Roger were riding up the creek in Bluff Creek, and we looked to past the root ball to our left, and up stood this creature. Now, you all know the story from here, but this is the confession. So, when I chased this creature up the bowling alley just after the sandbar there, she kind of put her two hands on this log and started to bend over and shake her rear end there profusely, and I saw those Bigfoot cheeks clap. And I looked back, and Roger, he was doing some relaxed dance, and he said, "Now everybody in the club getting tipsy." I'm not sure what that meant. And all I thought was, they really are real. They really do exist. So that's the confession, and Russell Accord can suck my...
And there you have it, folks. Not from the horse's mouth, but I can't help it. Yeah, it's just one of those situations where it just doesn't get any better than that. You got to thank Jonathan Sasquatch for that. I didn't do that. That is not on me. Yes, of course, it is a parody of the situation, and if you guys can't find any humor in it, then at this point, then shame on you. It's just so ridiculous. Half the names I don't even want to mention in this in the situation anymore. Just know that Bob's gonna take a butt licking over this. They're gonna just harass this guy over it. Now for sure, it's doubt cast upon the film's never been real. But apparently Bob Gimlin saw her clap her Bigfoot cheeks, and that's all you need to know to make for sure that it is one real creature. And that's, you folks, is going to be the end of that debacle as far as I am concerned. Okay, moving right along here. Bigfoot shelters, do's, don'ts, yeses, and nos. What the hell is a Bigfoot shelter, and why should anybody really give a flying crap? Well, for the longest time, last few decades at least, people have been finding these Bigfoot shelters, so they call them, in the woods. They look a lot like this. They look a lot like this. And gee, there you can see somebody's actually staked up inside of it, debris shelters, wiki-ups, just outright anything you can imagine. They want to call, a Sasquatch nest when, you can. I haven't really been convinced that Bigfoot need a shelter. I mean, I think they're smart enough that if it's really, really raining hard, to find a rock overhang or a big old friggin' evergreen to kind of lay up under until the rain passes. But, like most animals do. However, if you go on out to the Squatchopedia page here, squatchopedia.org, you'll find procedures for shelter evaluations. It's courtesy of the Mid-America Bigfoot Research Center as a part of their extensive listings of protocols. So when you're locating what you suspect to be a shelter, it's important to follow some very basic steps that will assist you in classifying it. These procedures are also important in proper documentation, which will help you in your research and overall understanding. Primarily dealing with shelters at this point, but most of the procedures are good for most of the constructs you'll find in the woods. First, and most importantly, when you do find one, don't start walking over to it. Don't go jumping up and down on it. Don't go pulling material off of it and generally messing up any possible evidence that may be present. I'll stop there for a moment. Saying that, the reason being is, if a large, hairy hominid creature or creatures put together said shelter, there should be obvious signs of the presence of said creatures making said shelter. Footprints, drag marks, hair marks, finger marks, all kind of crap. I mean, you're not going to be a giant hairy creature and not leave hair behind. Pardon me, I have to beat the crap out of my dogs. So, moving right along. Stay at least 10 feet away from the structure. You can even take a branch or use your foot to draw a rough circle around it as the reference point as to no intrude zone for the time being. Make note in your field journal of location, time, date. Initial observations include the GPS if you have that available too. And note any ground conditions present at the location. Is the ground covered in leaf litter? Is it grassy or dirt? How thick is the vegetation, trees and brush, and so on. Now, of course, the next thing you'd want to do would be to take pictures of the structure from all angles possible without entering that 10-foot circle. You can't take too many pictures, and that's absolutely true. If the structure is particularly interesting, I'd even suggest picking a point, taking a photo, stepping sideways, taking another picture, continuing to do so until you have circled the entire structure. The majority of the time, the ground will be covered in leaf litter, which really can assist in your investigation. Pick a location preferable in the front of any opening and start removing the leaf litter within the circle. Take your time and pay close attention to the ground under the leaves. If it's constructed by human, then there's a very good chance you'll find a shoe or boot tracks under the leaves. If this is the case, then don't stop your investigation because you can still learn a great deal from doing so. Also, This does not automatically negate a Bigfoot possibility. Oh, okay. Obviously, you're looking for the possible Bigfoot prints under the leaves. However, finding human tracks at the location, you'll have to pay closer attention to any possible Bigfoot tracks to ensure they're not distorted human tracks. Any tracks you find, you make sure, of course, you photograph even the human ones. And looking for human activity would be the absolute first thing you should do in any structure location in the forest. Assume that it's done by people, not by Sasquatches. You'll be right 9 times out of 10, probably 10 times out of 10. Of course, under the leaves, you want to also look for other animals, deer and bear. The reason being that animals are opportunistic with shelters and will use human constructs in the woods that also document these tracks. You'll want to take a sketch of it in your field journal and move to the interior of the structure and look to see if there's any compression areas within it. This is especially important as a relatively new construct. If it wasn't there last week, all animals, including humans, will leave compressed areas if it was used for a shelter. If you find a compression area, measure it and photograph it. If you're leaning towards it being a Bigfoot shelter, remove the contents, especially those in the compression area, and secure them in bags, taking care not to contaminate them. You will go through the material at a later time in a clean environment. Sure you will. Now examine the construct itself in detail. How old is the material? Are there any cut marks? Is there weaving material? And also how intricate any larger limbs or tree material was carried or dragged to the location. If it was dried, can you find the scuff marks on the ground? Make sure you note everything you can and take photos. So, debris shelters, primarily a survival shelter for protection from cold weather. Even when it's cold outside, you can be very warm in one. The common construction of it would be one end of a large limb or tree is placed in the crotch of a tree and down at a downward angle. Stumps, rocks, or other such to support the end 3 to 4 feet off the ground. The other end is left on the ground. Smaller limbs and brush are leaned against it to form a V. They are placed in sufficient number to support the cover. The cover is forest litter, creating an insulating blanket of leaves accessory. Very, very seldom will there be any cut marks on this type of shelter, as it's made completely from available forest materials. A teepee shelter, similar to a debris shelter, constructed when no notch or other suitable location is available, both freestanding and using an existing tree for support. These are the most often made by Boy Scouts and kids, and they are much less efficient, less stable, and more energy intensive to construct. Branches with the leaf material and attached to its preferred method of the installation as the angle of the structure is not great for holding leaf litter. Look for cut areas on the insulating branches. A knife to saw is a good indication of people. Wiki-ups. These are domed structures where the brush is piled to a center location from still rooted plants, secured and covered. If planned, the blank or whatever has been removed. There has also been made by driving saplings into the ground. The framework will usually be interwoven with horizontal brush. Not a survivalist structure, but they are made by Kid Scouts and native recreationists. And of course, blinds. Used by hunters and photographers, these are often only 2 to 3-sided, consisting of loosely woven branches with enough openings to allow for good views. Oftentimes, there are very loose weaves, as the intent is to break up the human outline than it is to completely hide them. So there you have a good set of instructions on what to look for if you find such things in the woods. Now, let's go back and take a look at some of these supposed Bigfoot structures that people find. Now, this would be one of those debris shelters that they're talking about, where the debris is just stacked up on an existing tree, made for some space inside of it to keep you warm. You can insulate it with leaf litter. It was probably made, a couple of seasons ago, because this stuff doesn't really move, and the leaf litter is actually decayed and moved away. But somehow, this is supposed to be a Bigfoot nest. Another hopeful Bigfoot nest of some sort. It's nearly exactly described as the wiki-up, as we talked about just a couple of minutes ago. We talked about the regular round debris shelter. These are all things that humans make when they're practicing survival, when they're out just off the grid camping. Kids do it just for shits and giggles. Oh, by the way, this show is not meant for children under the age of 13. If you're under the age of 13, go ask your parents if they actually love you. Now this one here, this one they actually called Bigfoot's house at Crystal Lake, and it literally has a door structure made into it, and it doesn't look to be big enough for, you know, Gomer Pyle, let alone a Sasquatch. That would be one of the things that you would have to really consider. Is the structure even big enough to hold the creature that you're claiming that would belong to it? I don't know so much. I've yet to find any type of a structure that doesn't lead me to believe survivalist. A lot of the wiki ups that we find like this that are out there in the woods are old Native American builds. Something like this could have been laying there for 100 years and no one would actually know it until you came across it and found it. Now, a lot of these people claim that these structures weren't there last week, but they're there this week. That's for sure. Here's another set of supposed nests of a Bigfoot nest. Now, this is some kind of interweaving pine needle debris hut shelter type of thing. Where would it get in and out? Why aren't there any worn down paths getting in and out of it? Where are the pathways that lead for it going out and finding water and food? If it's going to build something like this, they're definitely going to use it for some considerable amount of time. At least you'd start to think that at least. This definitely wouldn't be a one-time deal that the that the Sasquatch would use it. Now, saying all of that, let's go ahead and take our break and listen to our quasi theory of the week. Dean is MIA once again. I'm trying to reach him. I know he was having some health concerns and had some surgeries coming up. So I'm just praying that that is the case for now. If I hear anything from anybody or anybody hears anything from Dean that I haven't, please, by all means, let me know and I will do the same. But for now, let's take a listen to Dean Cooper and Father Time.
It is a few days into the new year, so I thought I would examine two metaphors for time. The first is well known, old Father Time himself. The image of Father Time, the old man wielding a scythe, stems from ancient Greece and Rome, where Kronos, the god of time, was depicted almost identically. Kronos used the scythe to cut the balls off his father, Uranus, who was the god of the heavens. In Rome, Kronos was known as Saturn, while his father was Uranus. The jokes make themselves. I leave it to you, dear listeners, to parse one out. The meaning of the old man time metaphor is obvious. Time cuts down all things. The meaning of the Kronos-Uranus metaphor is less direct. Kronos made sure that Uranus would have no more children and therefore had no real future. The other metaphor for time is much more modern and a bit less obvious to notice. It is the crocodile in Peter Pan, the one that swallowed a clock. Shmi, Captain Hook's first mate, says, "Someday the clock will run down and then he'll get you, as he'll get us all in the end." I'll end this quasi-theory with a bit of doggerel I've written. It's called Father Time's in Denial. Each day grows a little worse, I proclaim in ragged verse. Father Time's a crocodile, will all disappear behind his smile. Behind our eyes the questions spin, they'll all go away beyond his grin. You may read the text of this hypothesis on my blog, My Blatherings, at bydean.com. That's BHAIDIN.com.
Bydean.com. All right, folks, let's go ahead and give shout outs here and see who's hanging out live in the hangout with us tonight. Oh, there, of course, is Ari and Mary Duncan. They're shined up first thing tonight. Hello there. There's Mr. Frank Smith. Frank Smith's in the house with us. The Reverend Tim McCune. Hello, Tim. Glad you're with us. Titan Glass 88. How you doing there, Titan Glass? Miss Bella Allegria. Hello there, young lady. So glad you're with us as well. And there's our good friend Shane Barber. Hello, Shane Barber. Let's see here. There's that butthole Jeffrey Kelly. He's always got something to say right before the damn show. Can't squinch. That's right. We now know that his pronoun is he, I think. Don Reif, the Viking. Hello, my Viking brother. Glad you are joining with the kid. Man, every single time gets me. Hello there again. Cameron Young, that's right. Hello there, our Canadian buddy from above the border. Mr. Rod Dupree, the Reverend Rod Dupree. He's always in the place to be. Dog, you're driving me nuts with that squeaky toy tonight. I love you, but good God. Let's see here. Frank G's in the house. What up, Frank G? Karen Robb checked in with us as well. Hello there, Miss Karen Robb. And we're moving on down the bottom. If you haven't said hi to me, I can't say hi to you. Sass Quatch. Hello there. Glad you are back with us as well. And Isaac Bentley's in the house as well. Hello there. Hello there. That's right. Yeah, you need to be drug tested if you think Bigfoot's out there making shelters. I kind of agree with you. Let's see here. Lance Windsor's in the house as well. Hello there, Lance. And we've got John Schoen. Hello there, John Schoen. David Lee's in the house as well. Let me make sure I didn't miss anybody up there. Don't believe I did. And that is putting us down. That's right. I got on the Indian Creek Hatchery hat on tonight. If you want to donate something and want to give some money away, donate here to the Indian Creek Hatchery people, because they put a whole crap load of salmon back into the world every single year. Good work going on up there. Yeah, they're not so chatty tonight. Yeah, wait for another 10 seconds until you can't hear them shut up. So there we go, folks. Yeah, we are back at it. Bigfoot shelters. I'm not sure, man. I really, I'm just kind of neither here nor there. Now, I will tell you, I'll tell you a little story about a man named Fred. No, that didn't work. Did that work? That didn't work. That works. In Florida, during my investigations there, out of the 15 years or so that I dug around the Ocala National Forest, the only thing that really came across me as maybe some kind of a nesting situation, and I only ever found it the one time, but basically for a good quarter of a mile, 1,000 feet or so, all of the lower pine boughs were ripped off of the trees, not cut, not broken, ripped off of the trees up to about 12 feet. They were pulled off, and then along the way, about every 250 feet, there was just this giant pile of them. Now, when I found them, they were old. They weren't green anymore. They were brown. They had definitely been there for a while. And, but they were definitely piles of something. Now somebody or something ripped those branches off of those evergreens, no doubt about it. Whether it was people or whether it was the Ocala Sasquatch, I don't really know, but something ripped them off. And like I said, it was peculiar that it was at exactly about the 12-foot level that they stopped. And that went on for about a quarter of a mile. Every 250 feet, there was this big pile of these branches, and there was activity around the branches. I mean, there was disturbance. Now, Florida, in this part of the Ocala National Forest, is all basically sugar sand. It's impossible to get any kind of actual detailed tracks or prints of nearly anything, unless you found like the one spot of clay that was soaking wet when the bobcat or the cougar or the bear walked through it, if you're really lucky. Other than that, it's just trying to track things in this is nearly impossible. But there were definitely trails that led in and out from the spring that was just literally 100 yards away. There was a spring 100 yards away. There was plenty of food around. The pine, the pine cones, the pine seeds. What are the hell they called? The friggin' what do you know what I'm talking about? The pine nuts. That's the word I was looking for. Nuts. The pine nuts were in season. There was just tons of food around. Every sinkhole out there in the Ocala National Forest, if it's been there more than a year, has fish in it. And it just struck me as weird that this corridor had all the pine boughs ripped down and stacked up as though was it birthing? Were there a bunch of female? It didn't seem like there was that kind of slop around it. Like there wasn't that kind of remains around it. But like I said, it had been quite some time since I had found it. The Olympic Project, they also found some weird vegetative type of compressed down nesting that's not really been explained a whole lot. They kind of assumed that it was Bigfoot in them, but again, it's never really led anything. There's been no hair, there's been no DNA dissension from it. I mean, there's been nothing to actually prove that Sasquatch were the ones that laid down these things. And if Cliff Barrickman, he went in and checked those things out, and he literally had to like wrinkle himself up to lay in one of these things. So they obviously wasn't an 8-footer climbing up in one of these things and being comfortable and laying in some kind of a soft nest to sleep in. And again, this was one of those situations where nothing like that's ever been found anywhere else. It's the only situation where this has been found. I would really like to know the answer to what made them, Bigfoot or not. I mean, it wouldn't really matter to me what made them. I just find it very, very interesting because most of that vegetation that was all compressed was living. And that makes it a completely different aspect than the type of, deadened and pulled down branches that I had fallen. But as far as like shelters go, I've found some old Indian shelters. And that's probably the case in most cases where they're so old and you can't see any human activity around them at all. You're most likely finding something that's been there 100 years. You just never actually come across it. I mean, there's places in the Sierras that, man hasn't, if I step over there by that tree, man hasn't stepped over by that tree in 200 years. And if I look down into that valley, standing there by that tree, I might see something that nobody has seen in 200 years. And the types of discoveries that we get to, a lot of people automatically want to jump to the assumption that it's Bigfoot. It's Bigfoot, it's this, it's Bigfoot, it's that. And really, in the long run, Occam's razor tells you that the simplest explanation is probably truest. In most cases, that turns out to be right. Is it still cool? Absolutely. Would I still set up would I still cowboy up with a recliner inside one of those things if it was safe enough to not fall down on me? Probably. The energy inside those things are probably amazing. But in order to kind of stick it to really wanting it to be some kind of an animal builder structure, there has to be contributing factors. There has to be footprints that are going to be evident to it. There's going to have to be hair samples that are being able to take from it. At the very least, some kind of touch DNA or the environmental DNA would have to say, some kind of non-human primate was involved in activity around this shelter. And even then, that's still going to be hard to prove that, they were building these shelters. I mean, if they were building these shelters, we'd find them all over the Sierras because there's probably 5,000 Sasquatch between, the Sierra Nevada mountains going towards Canada. That's just in California. So we would find these things far more often if they were contributed to the animal prospect that we say actually exists in those areas, if they were going to be able to be contributed to those animals, if that makes any sense to you guys. Really, that's pretty much what we've got to say about Bigfoot shelters. Do's, don'ts, yeses, and no's. Be safe about them. If you go into them, make sure they don't fall down on you. Don't go into one while you're by yourself. If you're going to go into one, push on it, shove on it, make sure it's not going to fall down on you because, I mean, there's no coming back from that. A lot of that stuff's heavy. And, they don't call them widowmakers for nothing. So ideally be safe, go out in the woods, take a sit, look around, and at the very least, be happy about it. Really, that's where we're at this week, folks. I know it's kind of a shortened edition of it. I do have a Bigfoot campfire story for you tonight. This one's whatever, it's long enough. We'll be back next week with another live show. Let's see here. Next week is going to be the 21st. So, yep. If you've got any subjects that you'd like to see covered, or you got a topic that you'd like to come on the show and cover yourself, contact me. Let me know. We're always glad to have We're always glad to have guests on. Don't forget to watch out for those Bigfoot clapping them cheeks. And as far as Bob Gimlin is concerned, it's a real creature and they do exist. That's research that I was able to dig up. With that, everybody, thanks for being here. Be good to each other. And party on, dude. No, that's not what I say. May the Squatch be with you guys. See you next week. What the hell is that? I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure that was a Bigfoot. Let me tell you a story. Well, this story was told to me by a man named Gunter. Now, Gunter was a visitor to the States from over in Germany, and I happened to run into him on the side of the mountain in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, just as his adventure was coming to a close. Let's hear his story. I've always heard of how beautiful the American Smoky Mountains were, and as luck would have it, I met a new friend, and after a year of chatting online, he offered to let me stay at his place in base camp while I set out into the Smoky National Park. Well, now, Chris told me the right time of the year to come was the end of summer, so I made my plans and took the time off work, then booked my travels to the Smokies. Hit the park with the idea to hike and camp, and as I saw fit, I'd explore as much of the area as I could get in the month that I had of vacation. The first few weeks were really incredible. I had managed to hike all the way to the highest peak called Klingman's Dome. I didn't pack much because every couple of days I ran into a general store or a supply place to get food and water, and I would take it as needed. But up here it was pretty wild. Not much in the way of people, even though there are roads that lead everywhere. I rarely ran into anyone on the trails. I'd set up my primitive camp about 4 miles into the trail. I hadn't looked like anybody had used the area in quite some time, maybe even years. I was happy with it because it seems things were almost untouched, like the way it used to be. It was kind of getting cold in the elevation, so I started up a small fire and I set about making some food. I set a nice piece of pork on the fire spit to cook, and well, I must have dozed off because the next thing I realized, the fire was nearly out and the pork was, well, much overcooked. So I stirred the coals and added a piece of wood to the fire, and it practically roared right back to life with all the pine pieces that was in it. And then I noticed something in the shadows. It was just barely peeking from behind a tree. I had seen bears before. This was no bear. As the firelight got bigger, well, it retreated further back into the trees, but still kind of peeked out from here and there. I couldn't catch a real glimpse of it. It was mostly a silhouette, but boy, there was no detail at all. I tossed a piece of my candy bar out into the tree line and sat and waited. Sure enough, I heard something snorting and eating at it just a few short minutes later. Well, I knocked the wood to the side of the fire to let the fire die down a bit, and I tossed another piece of candy out just a little bit closer to my camp. Within a minute or two, something came closer, grabbed that piece of candy as well, and started eating it. So I tossed out another one, just a bit closer, and then I moved the wood back onto the fire. And just as this creature had come out to get that candy, the fire picked up again, and that's when it was in full view. Not the mighty 9-foot Sasquatch I've heard about, but a 6-foot creature covered in hair, somewhere between ape and man. And as the firelight swept up, it covered its eyes, kind of let out a meaningful grunt, and ran off into the trees once again. Standing there, shaking from shock, I had no real idea what it had been messing with. But once I laid eyes on it, there was no doubt that Bigfoot are real. That creature was no doubt it's going to be in my mind forever. Well, the rest of the night, I heard it pacing kind of out of sight, making lonely kind of grunting sounds, but I kept the fire burning. I wasn't so sure I wanted it near camp once again. I finally drifted off to sleep sometime in the darkness, and when I awoke, the fire had died down. Some of my gear was tossed about the area. See, my visitor wanted a keepsake, as I never could find my old used boxers. Well, it was 2 days later when I ran into Gunter. He had shared my camp with me, and we sat and told many different strange stories. He said he had made his way back and he didn't camp out alone all the way back until he had met me as well. I can't say that I blame him. Thanks for listening. I'm Reverend Jeff. May the Squatch be with you.